It gives me great pleasure to bring on board the man of the moment, which is Umang Vohra of Cipla. They have come out with excellent set of numbers of the weekend. The markets have responded. The stock has touched a new high. So what has really been the big tailwind for Cipla, and how the COVID crisis has really helped as a tailwind for the pharma industry? Let's discuss all that and much more with Umang Vohra. Umang, fantastic to have you back on ET Now. Thank you for joining us. I know you are in US, so I hope everything is safe and fine with you.
Yes, all is well. Thank you, Nikunj, and happy to be back on ET Now. I would just like to say, yes, in terms of numbers, Cipla, I think one of the big things, obviously, is the results are a testimony to our employees who've continued to work despite the lockdown, continue to work and come to, brave all the issues that they had with their societies, brave all the issues that they had with getting to work. But this is a testimony to that, and I want to thank each one of the 25,000 Cipla employees to be able to do this. So I think the results are a function of our company coming together, driven by caring for life as a purpose and delivering the set of numbers. I think the tailwinds of COVID, obviously we're one of the few sectors which is essential and therefore continues to work. That there's also another tailwind, and the tailwind is that we've had heightened levels of collaboration and cooperation with every healthcare authority in the world, which is trying to get more COVID drugs, more COVID treatments out as soon as possible. And of course, the fact that, at this point in time, pharmaceuticals and supply chains are reconfiguring to make sure that drug supply does not get affected. And a lot of our partners have done a fantastic role in that, and I'd like to acknowledge that. So I think those were the three things that I would call out as very critical towards the numbers that we posted.
Now, the healthcare industry, and especially some of the drug companies, have done a fantastic job of keeping all of us safe. So thank you very much. I guess everybody is acknowledging the kind of good work pharma companies, the hospitals and the doctors have put forward. Having said that, you'll appreciate my next question, and this is purely based on the recent price action, what the Cipla stock has seen. The general feeling in the market is that the COVID crisis has really acted as a tailwind for a company like Cipla. Is that true? And if hypothetically COVID crisis was not there, would these numbers would have been still that strong?
Well, I think the COVID crisis has given us an opportunity, Nikunj, to reimagine our business. Right? It has given us an opportunity to essentially come out to what is important to running our business. And also, there were a few costs that could not be incurred, no matter what we could do. I think when there's a lockdown, your field employees cannot operate, and a lot of our colleagues could not operate for a period of a month and a half. And I think the cost pattern also reflects that in our mix. All our manufacturing facilities are operating, so those costs are pretty much in there. In fact, costs there have been slightly higher because we've taken more precaution for social distancing, for transporting services to the factories, etc. But the field costs not being there for some portion of this quarter would have certainly helped, the bottom line. But at the same time, I also have to say that, we also had a period where there was no manufacturing happening in various parts of the country. And I think some of that, the costs continued, but the top line and the revenue that was linked to that did not come. So it's a mixed bag. I would certainly think that not being able to operate the field for field employees for a certain period of time has obviously contributed to this quarter in terms of cost control.
Has there been any shift in pricing or the way US or for that matter local drug administrators are now approaching generic companies at an industry level? Do you see that there is a change both in terms of attitude and also in terms of timely approvals?
I would certainly say timely approvals. I think I have to commend every healthcare authority across the world, whether it's in India or it's in the US or in some of the other emerging markets. I think a tremendous amounts of collaboration with pharma companies to get drugs that are needed for COVID approved faster. So I think that has happened. I think the timeliness of approvals is definitely at an all-time high. And I think in terms of pricing, at least in the only market where this was a concern was really the US, considering all that's happened in the past. But in the US, our belief is this is stabilized now. And I think there's more attention to availability of product as against pricing.
So let's talk about the sustainability of growth and margins in the light of coming competition for something like Albuterol. It's worked very well for Cipla, but competition will only intensify. What will that do to your aggregate picture?
I think Albuterol, Albuterol is a series of things, Nikunj, that we're trying to get in our respiratory franchise. The respiratory is a core therapy for Cipla, and we've done this for a large number of years. Albuterol is the first. We've also announced that we filed Advair, and we've also got a reasonable pipeline built up for the respiratory franchise that will eventually unlock over the next 18 to 24 months within the US, and it's unlocked in different parts of the world already. If you look at Albuterol ramp up, I think we've ramped up quite significantly in the first quarter. And, it's a 60 million unit market, broadly, if you look at it. Cipla will get its fair share here. And our cost position is strong. I think we're very well vertically integrated, and we will play this market with the perspective of getting a fair market share.
The respiratory products which you just talked about, will that be a big differentiating factor for at least 3 years for Cipla? Because as things will unlock, as more and more product pipeline will keep on coming higher, is this going to be, if I may use the word, game changer for Cipla for next 3 years?
Yes, I think you could say that. I won't be able to say whether it's a game changer or not, but I think if you're asking me, is this the new portfolio that could sustainably grow Cipla's business and the unlocking of it in the US? Yes, absolutely. And I think we're looking forward to that over the next 2 to 3 year period.
You've done a great job of cutting cost, whether it is on the promotion side or travel or perhaps other expenses. On the other side, in your own analysis, things are looking up, and then you got the respiratory opportunity coming in. So then why are you conservative with your margin guidance?
Well, I think some of the costs that that we controlled was voluntary, some was involuntary, right? So not having field to be able to work in the market is not an ideal situation for us. And so therefore, a lot of the travel costs linked with it, etc., did not happen this quarter. We see some of that resuming again in the quarters ahead. But we, despite that, we have a fairly ambitious cost program which has been running over the last 2 to 3 years, which we will continue to run. So I think we are guiding to the same levels of margin that we had before the lockdown on a full year basis, and we hope to improve and better that going forward. But not every quarter will be like the first quarter we've seen, because a large portion of our cost base could not be in the market. So the sustainable basis for every quarter is going to be slightly lower than this quarter in terms of absolute percentage.
Let's talk about the domestic market, and that's where the real change for large companies has been. What is your understanding, given that the COVID crisis in India is going to last longer? How exactly will that business change, and whatever changes we've seen in last couple of weeks and months, are they permanent or are they temporary?
So I think let's try and answer this question maybe from disease incidence first, and then we'll come back to the how of we run our business and whether that's going to change. So from a disease incidence, we're seeing chronic conditions will continue to stay the same. I don't think we see an impact too much there. I think the respiratory linked illnesses, linked to weather, linked to winter, I think those will continue. I certainly think that, if the lockdown continues for longer, the acute conditions and the hospital settings will continue to see a lower trickle of patients. And acute because, in a way, it's good that the acute therapy is not growing because patients are healthier. They're not reporting sick. And in hospitals, I think surgeries are being put out, etc., and that's a mix. So I think in hospitals, we see a resumption. Probably we started seeing some numbers beginning to uptick now, but we will see a resumption of surgeries and elective procedures, etc., perhaps in a quarter's time. The acute is largely responsive to whether there is a flu or a viral outbreak, and I think at that point in time, that segment will respond. So I think that's the pure disease incidence. We see a little bit a lower acute setting because people are not moving around as much and they're at home, and so conditions are more contained. In the how of our business, I think things are changing. There are more doctors who like to be connected digitally. There are more conferences which are happening digitally. And I think that 15 to 20% of our market, or the way we understand the market, will be different from how it was before COVID to how it is likely to be after COVID. And I think that how of the business has some reimagination that we've done, and also something that we hope will stick.
So how will that change the financials? Let me pick up the last answer and talk about the how forward then. How will that change financials for the domestic market?
Well, if you look at it, even if you say 15-20% of the market is different, the cost of doing business digitally is lower than the cost of doing business physically. Let me put it that way, right? And so, if you begin to substitute those costs, there is some leverage that you will get in terms of your overall cost base. And these costs are essentially the cost of a rep going and meeting a doctor, the cost of the travel associated with the rep salary. All of that can help, can at some point in time be digitally done, provided doctors are more accepting of it. And we're clearly seeing some doctors becoming more accepting of it. I think the other thing it does, Nikunj, is digital has the ability to penetrate healthcare more significantly compared to what the model that we have today, which is of having physical reps. And I think digital allows you to connect more remotely and faster, right? And also more economically. So we are also using this opportunity to see how many more doctors we could connect with, which historically we couldn't do because of the fact that it essentially needed reps to be on the ground, whereas now we can do it technologically. So I think those are the two types of things that are happening within pharma companies of today.
It's a great point, Aika. Just like the SARS crisis gave birth to the Chinese internet boom, and how demonetization forced us to use more API apps and start using more credit card. Maybe this is going to change the way how pharma is distributed. How large that could change, Umang? Because what you're bringing out is perhaps a structural change in the industry. IT companies, when they came on my show, they also said the same thing. We are not going to be expanding campuses. We all will work from home. That is their imagination. Your imagination is to migrate your selling and representatives on a digital platform. How large this potentially could be?
I think there are, unfortunately, the IT companies are a point to point, right? If you look at it, it's you and your customer. Here, there is a mix of a patient, there is a mix of a doctor, and there is a mix of a chemist, right? So there are three people, and then there is a pharma company which is trying to, manage this entire universe. So I think it is a function of how quickly, how quickly would doctors want. It's a function of how many. And the type of service we provide. You see, the issue is a lot of us try and just replicate digitally what is already happening, and that doesn't really change the experience of a user. So here, the doctors, if they get a better sort of a knowledge education, because this changes digitally, also impacts their time significantly, because they don't have to meet people as much as they can, do it on the way when they're in the car, etc. So we're hoping that some of those changes can happen, and that for that the doctors are already showing that they're accepting some of these changes more, and we hope that can accelerate. I think patients is the other big connector in the system. More and more patients are now, we're finding, patients and consumers are becoming extremely conscious of their own healthcare. And so this industry is changing, with patients becoming more conscious, with doctors wanting to have minimal contact but maximum experience out of knowledge with pharma companies. And at some point in time, the distribution ecosystem in India is also changing with the likes of Reliance Jio, etc. So we are thinking of this and saying maybe 15-20% of this market for now, in about a year's period, would have this type of functionality when it begins to change. And there's this S curve, or there's this inflection point where curves begin to change dramatically. And we see that coming, but it's about 2, 3, or 4 years maybe out. But it's also that old ways of doing business keep trying to resurge, which means that there will be a section of doctors who would want physical meetings with reps. There will be a section of patients who will not want to still manage their health online. And so I think those would also continue to play as counterbalanced to this. So I think 15-20% is a good estimate for how we think this business would change in the next 1 year.
Okay, wonderful answer. My next immediate question is perhaps got to do with the trajectory of last 3 years of your top line and of your profits. Your profits are growing at a rate which is much higher than your sales. That's largely because of cost cutting and product mix. At what time do you think they both will start converging?
Well, Nikunj, the way I look at it is that we are growing at about 9 to 10%, somewhere around our sales line. And I think this is slightly higher than where we've grown in the past. It's tough to manage your productivity when your growth begins to slump, right? So at some point, I would like to see our top line growing faster, right? And also there's this other hypothetical question, right, in which I'm reminded of every time that I speak about the company. And it is our vision as a company, to have a sustainable level of EBITDA, and not one where, we keep growing it to a level where we lose touch with what the purpose of the organization was. We were born to save lives. And certainly the actions that we put into COVID, etc., are showing that, showing how Cipla works at its heart. And so as long as we have respectable profitability, it's fine. I would ideally like to cover more patients. I would ideally like to sell more drugs into the market, which cure life-threatening conditions. And that is the purpose that we want. So if your question is, where do we want this to converge? We want our top line to grow higher. We obviously want to manage EBITDA in an industry range. We don't want to be probably known as a company that has the highest EBITDA, but a company that stays in a respectable range for the organization. But what we do want to be known as is a company that steps forward every time that there is a crisis and works with its heart to make sure that people feel better. So that would be the recollection I would want for Cipla, right, as a company going forward.
Just 2 more follow-up questions. And when I was preparing for the interview, I divided the track record of Cipla every 5 years. If I take the clock back, 5 years ago, margins were different, the portfolio was different, the US presence was very low. 5 years henceforth, everything has changed for Cipla on the margin front, on the focus market front, and on the specialty portfolio. 5 years forward, hypothetically, if you and me are engaging in a conversation, and let's hope next time if we meet after 5 years, we meet in person over a cup of coffee, we're not curtailed because of the COVID crisis, what do you think we would be discussing?
I think I would be very happy at that point, Nikunj, if the discussion could be around innovation. If the discussion could be around, Cipla would, in 5 years, in this 5-year journey, Cipla is a very strong generic player. But could Cipla eventually be a company that could bring out more specialty, could bring out more innovation into the market while fulfilling all of it? I think that would be my first thing. So did Cipla really move up the innovation curve would be a question that I would certainly like to address 5 years later. The second would be, we are number 2 in the number of devices we sell worldwide for respiratory medication. Could Cipla be number 1 in the lung leadership space? Right now, GSK has the leadership position. Could it be Cipla in terms of worldwide sale of devices 5 years from now? So I think those would be great topics. And the third would just be whether we continue to stay core to our purpose, right? Whether Cipla was still known 5 years later as the company that responds to crises, works with its heart. I think if we are able to do all these 3, then we would have covered very, very significant ground.
Wonderful. So my last question is that I'm asking everyone who's been coming on my shows to talk about their COVID experience. So for Umang personally, who's staying in US, away from his family, what's been your most joyful moment? What's been your most painful moment? And what's been your learning moment in last 3 to 4 months?
I think my most joyful moment, frankly, has been just the level of responsibility. It's brought a lot of stress as well, but the level of responsibility and the marvelous, the marvelous notes of appreciation that have come our way on how people have been cured and treated with our drugs. I think there is nothing more exhilarating like that. And these get combined in different ways, Nikunj, right? When you're near and dear, your parents call you and tell you that, we are so proud of the work that you're doing. I think that is the biggest reflection of anyone's effort, right? So I think it's just the society appreciating us for what we're doing. I think the moments where you're always worried about the health of your family, right? Those are the really low moments when you begin to realize that somebody in your family has fever, or somebody is not well, or has to go to a hospital, maybe for COVID, may not be for COVID. Those are the really low moments, right? And at that point in time, obviously a lot of us resort to prayers, but it's also about the realization that how important is health overall, right? Jaan hai to jahan hai, we say that in India. But I think that's the biggest realization that I've had. And lastly, it's just that whenever you have a crisis, I think the most important thing, be with people who are your near and dear, because I think if you're away from them, it's always difficult to manage it.
Well, like we say that it's important to stay safe, it's important to stay alive. So thank you very much. And before we wrap, Umang, on behalf of everyone from ET Now and some of my other colleagues, thank you very much. Kudos to the entire team of Cipla and your colleagues and employees. I'm speaking from personal experience. Every time we've contacted Cipla for some, health crisis, they've always been very forthcoming. They've left no stone unturned to ensure that they do the needful to keep the society safe. So thank you very much, and I certainly hope to see much more of you going forward.
Thank you so much, Nikunj, and please be safe. Thank you.